And welcome everyone to this edition of the live stream. We are coming to you live from the Huckabee Theater, just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, where this week we will be taping our show that'll be airing this weekend. It will be one you will want to see. We'll talk about that a little later. Johnny Livesey is with me. He's going to be reading questions that you're sending in, and hopefully you already are sending them in. And we have a lot to get to today, an enormous number of pretty interesting topics. We'd love for you to send your questions, get them in the chat. You can send a super chat for more attention. Moderators watch the chat, get the questions to us, and we try to do our best to answer them. Here's some of the things we're going to cover today. The judge in the Georgia RICO trial against President Trump, Judge McAfee, gives a ruling on the fate of Fani Willis. We'll talk about kind of a surprise today. We'll also take a look at what kind of boost President Biden got after his State of the Union address. Little spoiler, it ain't that good. And the purge has come to Pittsburgh and Canada. Stick around to hear all about it. We usually start our live stream with a pre-show poll. That gives all of you that get here early a chance to weigh in on a topic of the day. So, Johnny, what were our questions today and how did people answer them?
All right, pretty simple question. I must preface by saying that the result was a little surprising, very pragmatic. Not that I don't expect people to be pragmatic, but I don't expect them to answer these polls pragmatically. So the question is, which is the biggest downer? The economy, no cake or bacon in the fridge. That's a downer.
No cake?
Or bacon.
Wow.
That's, I can't imagine a bigger downer. I mean, anyway. Joe after his State of the Union speech, or Kamala's laugh.
Biggest downer. I'll go with bacon and cake.
No bacon or cake in the fridge? That's what I would have picked. Surprisingly, only 5% of people picked that option.
What kind of people do we have watching this that don't think that's a huge problem?
I'm guessing that you have a much bigger vegan audience than you thought you did.
If I have any vegan audience, I'm going to be pretty surprised as much as I talk about my carnivore ways.
I mean, truly, what could possibly explain that answer, though?
I don't know.
Yeah, me neither. So the economy won out with 67, it's actually bouncing between 67, 68%.
Okay.
Joe, after his State of the Union speech, 19%. Kamala's laugh at 9%.
Interesting. You know, the last several weeks on this, I have been like the outlier every time. I'll pick, but I tell you what I think it is. Our audience takes this more seriously than I do. The pre-show poll. I take all the topics seriously. But the pre-show poll, I kind of have a little fun with it. So often I will pick what I think is the most ridiculous part of it, even though it may not be the legitimate answer that we would have picked. Anyway, our top comment from our last live stream comes from Cindy Davies, who said, quote, Joe was loud and snarky. He had more fervor for Ukraine than for America. Ooh, keen observation, Cindy, and I think I would agree with you. He certainly was exercised about helping Ukraine. I didn't hear a whole lot of information from him about how he was going to help Americans. And you know what I didn't hear? I haven't heard anything from Joe about how he is demanding that Hamas let American citizens who are being held hostage get released. Why are we hearing that? Chuck Schumer didn't mention it. We'll get to a little more of that in a moment. But here's my question for you this week. Was Joe Biden treated differently than Donald Trump on keeping classified documents? You had the Robert Hur hearings this week, so maybe that's fresh on your mind. It is on mine. Leave your answers in the chat or in the comments section below. Was there a difference in the way that Donald Trump was treated and Joe Biden was treated in relationship to those documents? Hey, this is a great time as we're getting started. Hit that subscribe button, the notification bell. Be sure to like and share what we're doing here. That way more people will be able to join us. I thought the big story of the week in many ways was the ridiculous speech of Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. It was disgraceful, despicable, downright disgusting. And I'm talking about his statement where he essentially told the people of Israel that they ought to overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister, and in the middle of a war, for heaven's sakes, and implied that if they didn't, the U.S. might have to rethink its friendship with Israel. Everything about what he said was just absolutely unacceptable. To start with, when is it Chuck Schumer's business who the people of Israel elect to their prime minister? That's their business. And I thought that we weren't supposed to interfere in elections. And that was a big problem when other countries wanted to interfere in our elections. In fact, don't we have a video of Chuck Schumer? I think we do. And this is the Chuck Schumer in 2020, who was very worried about how other countries might interfere in our elections. It's cut to, let's see if it's ready.
How worried are you on a scale of 1 to 10 about interference in the election?
I'm very worried. They did it before. It's a lot of countries are trying to do it. We have to be prepared. We have to be guarded. We have to make sure they don't. If people think that a foreign country helped determine our election and lose faith in our democracy, that's the beginning of the end of this grand experiment in democracy that's been so successful for more than 200 and some odd years.
Now, that was Chuck Schumer in 2020. It's a threat to democracy if other countries want to interfere in the elections of the United States. This is Chuck Schumer this week on the floor of the Senate when he didn't mind at all interfering in the election of Israel. In fact, they don't have an election going on. He suggests they ought to get one so they can get rid of somebody that he personally doesn't like. Let's watch.
The fourth major obstacle to peace is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. As a lifelong supporter of Israel, it has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then, and the Israeli people are being stifled right now by a governing vision that is stuck in the past. 5 months into this conflict, it is clear that Israelis need to take stock of the situation and ask, must we change course? At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel.
There you go. So Chuck Schumer is lecturing the people of Israel who elected Benjamin Netanyahu, their leader. I mean, this would be like Benjamin Netanyahu getting on TV and telling us that we ought to get rid of Joe Biden. I might welcome that speech. Maybe that's a good idea. No, seriously, we don't take kindly to people who tell us who we should elect or not elect. Chuck Schumer says he's the greatest friend of Israel. No, he's not. Look, Chuck, I don't know if you know this or not, but Benjamin Netanyahu has approval ratings way better than yours. His are way better than Joe Biden's in this country, and his are in the 60 percentile. Even his opponent, Benny Gantz, was aghast at the speech that Schumer made and totally repudiated the idea that some senator in the United States ought to be dictating to Israel when it's time for them to elect a new government. Here's what I want to know. Why didn't Chuck Schumer call for a different government in Russia? He didn't call for a different government in China. He's not calling for a different government in Iran or North Korea. I mean, those are real problem places. So why didn't Chuck Schumer say, let's get rid of Kim Jong-un in North Korea? He's a kook. Let's get rid of Putin. He's a thug. Let's get rid of President Xi in China. He's trying to take over the world and destroy most of what we know as some level of privacy. Nope, he didn't take on any of those people. He took on our closest ally, the only democracy in the Middle East, took on Israel because he doesn't personally like Benjamin Netanyahu, who happens to be right of center. And that, I guess, what bothers Chuck. But look, let's be clear. What this is about is the Arab American vote in Michigan. That's what this is about. Joe Biden's in real trouble. In the Michigan primary, 100,000 people in Michigan voted uncommitted in the Democrat primary. In other words, 100,000 people said, no Joe. No go, no Joe. And it spooked them. And they realize they've got real trouble because their support for Israel has made them pariahs to the people like Rashida Tlaib and the cuckoos like her who go around saying, ceasefire now. These are the Hamas supporters. Folks, I don't care if somebody supports Hamas. That's disgusting. I went to the villages where Hamas butchered babies and women and entire families in front of each other. And I don't mean just murdered them, I mean butchered them, mutilated their bodies while they were alive and after they were dead. And they took innocent civilians hostage, and they still hold American citizens hostage. Chuck Schumer didn't say one thing about those hostages. Joe Biden hadn't said one thing about those U.S. citizen hostages. They're talking about pushing Israel to give up something. Why don't you push Hamas to let go of the hostages, for heaven's sakes? And talking about how they prosecute the war. You know, I don't remember us being all that kind after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Civilians died by the hundreds of thousands. And I don't remember us saying, yeah, we better listen and see if there's some people over in Asia that don't like what we did. Or the bombing of Berlin. Folks, there were thousands and thousands of innocent civilians that were killed. Why did they get killed? You say, was it our fault? Or was it the fault that you had Hitler destroying entire countries? War is a nasty thing. And the Israelis have tried not to kill civilians, but Hamas keeps grouping civilians right up against their rocket launchers, and they don't do anything to protect their innocent civilians. They don't mind murdering them. So this nonsense that somehow this is all Israel's fault. What I think Israel should do, not that they've asked me, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you, and if it gets back to them, fine. All this pressure on them to quit building the communities in Judea and Samaria, what I wish a president would do is to say, you know, if you're going to continue to have Iranian-sponsored proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah to disrupt Israel's security, then I think we should encourage Israel to build as many family communities in Judea and Samaria as they can. Do it quickly and build them out. Just go ahead and just stop talking about a two-state solution. That's dead. We're never going to have one. We shouldn't have one. And if we do have one, let's put it in Egypt. Let's put it in Jordan. Let's put it in the UAE. Let's put it in Qatar. Let's put it in Iran, for heaven's sakes. They all got more land than Israel does, 644 times the amount of land. So let's quit talking about a two-state solution. It's utter insanity to even bring it up. And Chuck Schumer keeps bringing it up because it's some talking point of politicians, but it really ticks me off. And I, for one, I'm not a Jew, but I stand with the Jewish people of Israel, in part because I happen to know that they do elect their own people. They have free speech and freedom of thought, and no other country in that region of the world allows that. And these crazy people from the left were talking about, oh, free the Palestinians. Free them. They're not in any way imprisoned because of Israel. It is their own crazy, radical, far insane government that makes life miserable for them. And it's time we start getting that clear. All right, we're going to... Yep.
If I may, something that I learned recently, and maybe I was alone in this ignorance, that really emphasizes how purely political that was from Schumer, is the fact that Israel has a war cabinet leadership right now, which I didn't understand what that meant before a few days ago. And basically, correct me if I'm missing it a little bit here, basically that means that Bibi has the same authority as it pertains to making decisions in this war against Hamas as Benny Gantz and a few other people in the war cabinet. Bibi's not the one actually making decisions. He's not the leader in that arena. And so as far as Schumer's request or saying that Bibi should be taken out of leadership, it wouldn't change a thing because he's not the one making decisions.
Not the only one. Now,
he's not the
to
only
be fair,
one. There are
as
others
Prime
making
Minister,
decisions.
he has the ultimate leadership role, but he does have a war cabinet. He has a coalition government.
Yeah.
The Israelis don't have a two-party system. They have a multi-party system, about 14 different political parties, and you have to get a coalition of enough of those to get to 61 votes in the Knesset to be able to rule. So that's why Netanyahu is the prime minister, because he had the coalition. Benny Gantz did not. But in this war, Benny Gantz and Lapid and all of his opponents for the prime minister's job have all been supportive of him and have said, after the war, when it's all finished and we've defeated Hamas, we'll talk about what we need to take as the next step. And it's very possible Netanyahu will not survive an election following it. But right now, the people of Israel are united in their support because they say, why would we change our leader in the middle of a war? That is a reward to Hamas, and we're not going to do that.
Right.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to a big case this week in Georgia. Most of you perhaps have followed the Fani Willis case. Fani Willis, Fani Willis. You say Fani, I say Fani. I don't care.
Phony.
Fani Willis. That's probably more appropriate. But just today, Judge McAfee found that the evidence that was presented against Fani Willis and her lover, Mr. Wade, was such that she either has to step down or fire him. Well, guess what she's going to do? She's not going to fire herself. She's got a nice paycheck. But he did not address the fundamental issue that they perjured themselves in court as to when their relationship started, what they did with all that money. She paid him $700,000 to be a special prosecutor, way beyond, way beyond what anybody else would have ever been paid for that, even though he had no experience. But he did have experience in taking her on wonderful trips to the Bahamas, to Aruba, to all kinds of wonderful destinations, while, by the way, he was still married to another woman. Good work if you can get it, right? And supposedly she reimbursed him for her part of that. But there are no receipts because she did it all in cash. And if you dare question that she did it in cash, you're a racist. Didn't know if you knew that or not, but that makes you a racist. This is insane. And that judge was a coward to not just come out and deal with it in a more profound way. But let's take a look at even on MSNBC. They were expecting this whole thing to go down against both Fani Willis and Wade. I think they probably are a little surprised. But here was what they anticipated. Let's watch.
It's so legalistic centric and yet so important and fascinating.
Right. Don't let the legalese fool you. This is epic. This is monumental. If things are going in the direction we think, Fani Willis lied to the court, it's game over for her. She will be disqualified. If they had a relationship prior to when they represented to the court, it's a huge deal. I can't overstate it.
And do you?
You can't overstate it, but now you can. Because the judge basically just said, yeah, it's horrible, and yeah, she lied in court. She's a prosecutor, but she lied in court. That's called perjury. It's a felony. You get sent to prison for that. And you misappropriated money. That's a felony. The unethical issues, maybe not are punishable by crime, but these other things are. And even the MSC people who normally would defend anyone from the left who's going after Donald Trump, they couldn't do it. They didn't have to because this judge did it for them. Now, here's a little nasty truth. He's up for re-election. Fulton County has a lot of African-American voters, and he's convinced that if he were to rule against Fani Willis completely, why, they wouldn't vote for him. I think that's an insult to the African-American voters of Fulton County because I think, quite frankly, it's an insult to think that African-American voters would somehow approve of the behavior of this perjurer and adulterer. I think I would like to believe that they might be offended that one in their own community disgraced herself and their community by the outrageous actions. None of them get to go at government expense on cruises and pretend that it was all reimbursed in cash. They're not making these trips to the Caribbean on cruise ships. And I have a feeling that some of them might not think that was such a great idea and that maybe she should pay the price for her crimes, just like a lot of them pay the price for crimes when they get accused. But that's me. All right. Let's go to a little look at what's happened since the State of the Union address that Joe Biden made last week. I think a lot of people, especially Democrats, thought, hey, he stayed awake for a full hour. He screamed and yelled for a full hour. And therefore, he was fiery. No, he was obnoxious. I thought it was so kind of over the top and insulting to have somebody yell at me for an hour that I really was hoping I'd get one of those phone calls and somebody would want to talk to me for 20 minutes about extending my car warranty. That would have been a more pleasant conversation than having Joe yell at me. Anyway, much to the surprise and I'm sure disappointment of the Democrats, polls showed that Donald Trump has actually improved his margin over Joe Biden, 4 points nationally, 45% of the respondents saying they would vote for Trump, 41% to back Biden, another 13% undecided. It's pretty amazing. Now, all this talk about how energized he was, many of us speculated, what did they give him, a shot of B12? I mean, it must have been something really good, because here he was the following day.
And what they're going to do is to ensure a national, really endanger our national security. They're going to expend, are they going to expand personal freedoms? Well, that's what we're going to do. They're going to do everything to not grow our economy. Literally, they have no platform. They're against everything, not for anything, except the things that are the wrong things. What they're running on, I'll tell you what they're running on. They're running backwards. Mm-hmm. It's about the future, not the past. But guess what? We won't let them win the past.
My gosh, there was no energy in that. I'd say get that B12 out, whatever it was. I don't know, maybe in speed. Heck,
Are there any words in that either?
I don't know. Just is sad. Okay, it wasn't the only time. He's had several speeches and events since then. Here's yet another. He can't even get through the full sentence.
Tremendous amount of things you can cut. Let me be precise. Tremendous amount of things you can do, not cut. He said, but the bottom line is, he's still at it.
You see, that sounds like a cold read of a teleprompter, and you really are struggling with it. It's like a rehearsal. That's what that sounds like. He's rehearsing. He's not read it. He's trying to get through it, and somehow the words are all jumbled up, and he can't get through it.
I've listened to you do cold reads on prompter for at least, about almost 7 years now. And I think the closest you've ever gotten to ever sounding like that was when you were trying to pronounce a Russian name. That's as bad as it ever got.
And then I would just make something up.
And then you just made something up. You ad-libbed. You were all right.
Which I learned to do when I was a 14-year-old newsreader in a radio station in Hope, Arkansas. It was during the Vietnam War. And I'd get up there and I'd have a cold read of some news story from the Associated Press and all these Vietnamese names that I could not, they were this long and I didn't know Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. But you know what I figured out? Nobody in Hope, Arkansas did either.
They didn't know.
So I could say, Panan Shan Ting today made us, and nobody knew the difference. So I'm confessing now after all these years that was easier than trying to stumble through some name I could not pronounce. One of the things that's very troubling is when Joe Biden is at an event and people want to start asking him questions, he pretends that it's really not up to him. Sir, you are the president of the stinking United States. If you want to answer questions, you're certainly free to do that. Nobody really is over you. It's not like you work for some 20-year-old wrangler. But I want you to watch what happens when he says, can I take a couple of questions?
We're going to take a few questions.
Thank you, Press. Thank you so much. Back in the vehicles. Back to the cars. Thank you. Back to the cars. We're happy to walk home. Vehicles are this way. Thank you. All good. Thank you so much. Thank you. We got to go.
Gotta go. Thank you. They pushed him out of the way. These people, by the way, work in a White House, and every White House has them, every president. They're called the Wranglers, and that's what they do. Their job is to go in, and when it's over, whether it's because of time or because they don't like the questions, their job is to start saying, thank you, gotta go, guys, get out of here, and they push them out. But this was when Joe is basically saying, can I take some questions? And suddenly his staff, they go into immediate panic mode. Oh my gosh, we can't let him take questions. We don't know where that's going. And so they start chasing everybody away. It's not just there. I think this is one that I love because it's not only that they shut everything down, they actually unplug the video feed. Watch.
Anyway, am I allowed to take any questions? Anybody here who's staff?
Stop the cars. Thank you, press.
So they go to color bars. They just cut the feed and go back to the engineering signal because, no, he can't take questions because the staff, they don't want him to. They have no idea what he'll say. They'll totally nervous that he'll say something ridiculous that they'll spend the next week trying to unravel. But that's pretty sad. That's the President of the United States, and his own staff doesn't trust him to answer a question or two. Here's part of the reason they don't, is because when he's unscripted, he does say things that then he has to go and undo. Even though in this case, he said something during the State of the Union. Marjorie Taylor Greene heckled him and kind of pushed him into saying the name of Laken Riley, who he mispronounced twice, called her Lincoln. And anyway, he talked about how the illegal Venezuelan murdered her. But then all the people on the far left said, you can't call someone illegal. Why? That's just not right. So then in an interview with NBC, he apologizes. Let's watch.
I noticed the look of surprise on your face when you walked into the chamber and you saw Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was priceless. You feigned shock at seeing her. But during your response to her heckling of you, you used the word illegal when talking about the man who allegedly killed Laken Riley.
An undocumented person. And I shouldn't have used illegal. It's undocumented. And look, when I spoke about the difference between Trump and me, one of the things I talked about on the border was that the way he talks about vermin, the way he talks about these people polluting the blood. I talked about what I'm not going to do, what I won't do. I'm not going to treat any of these people with disrespect. Look, they built the country. The reason our economy is growing. We have to control the border and more orderly flow, but I don't share his view at all.
So you regret using that word?
Yes.
I regret that a lot of people voted for this guy. That's what I regret. Now, several things he said that were totally untrue. Let me give you an example. When he said, basically, illegal people built the country. No, they didn't. Not illegal immigrants. Is it fair to say that immigrants have helped build a country? Absolutely. Look, we all love immigrants. Why not? Most of our families came from somewhere. They didn't just, originate right out of the earth. Maybe some of us have some Native American blood in us, but let's face it, for the most part, people have ancestry that may come from Asia, maybe from Europe, maybe from the Middle East, maybe from South America. That's great. It's what makes America special. It is a melting pot from all cultures, languages, ethnicities. That's great. But not an illegal invasion where people ignore the law and just come willy-nilly because they decided they wanted to. And then we put them up with hotel rooms and meal cards and $10,000 gift cards in New York City. No, that's not what built the country. What built the country was people who came here because they wanted to be Americans and they wanted to work really, really hard. They wanted to live the American dream and do better for their families. And some of the greatest success stories in this country are stories that come from our immigrants, but the legal ones, the ones who came because they did want to work hard and they didn't break in the middle of the night. They came right through the door, some of whom they spent years getting to be citizens, and they spent a lot of money becoming citizens. And it's an insult to them for Joe Biden to sit there and pretend that an illegal coming in is the same as a person who came in the right way. That's just totally wrong. He also made a big lie when he said Donald Trump called all the immigrants and the illegals vermin and poisoning the blood. He never said it that way. The context of it was that when you have people who come in and commit murder and crimes and they rape young women in this country, that's vermin. Isn't that true? Would you not call it that? And that's what he was referring to. He did not and never did say that every immigrant, including illegals, not that every one of them, were vermin. But let's face it, if somebody comes in here and rapes your granddaughter, who's 9 years old, and you say, oh, they built the country, then you're an idiot. You don't say that. You probably call them worse than vermin. And Joe's lying about that, and it's disgusting. You know who I like, though, in dealing with the press? Elon Musk. I've never met him. I'd like to. I think I would really like him. He's just one of those people that says what he thinks and doesn't care. For reasons that maybe will never make sense, he granted an interview with Don Lemon, the fired and disgraced former CNN talking head, who is pretty much an empty head. And for some crazy reason, he thought he would confront Elon Musk. And it didn't go well. Watch.
Do you believe that X and you have some responsibility to moderate hate speech on the platform? That you wouldn't have to answer these questions from reporters about the Great Replacement Theory as it relates to Democrats?
I don't have to answer these questions.
The Great Replacement Theory as it relates to Jewish people. Do you think that?
I don't have to answer questions from reporters. Don, the only reason I'm doing this interview is because you're on the X platform and you asked for it. Otherwise, I would not do this interview.
So you don't think? Do you think that you wouldn't get in trouble or you wouldn't be criticized for these things?
I'm criticized constantly. I could care less.
I love it. I get criticized constantly. I could care less. Beautiful response. Beautiful response. I don't have to answer questions from reporters. No, you don't, Elon. And good for you that you recognize that. Speaking of questions, I know you've got some out there, so let's take a few.
Yes, we got a super chat from Mitchell Ryan. Thank you for that. That's $2 from Mitchell. The question is, can Trump appeal the ruling?
The Georgia ruling?
The Georgia ruling, yeah.
Yeah, he can. He probably will. But the bigger question really gets down to, does this leave a taint in the whole process that will make it possible, even if he goes through the trial and he loses, say, the idea of throwing it out on this basis, this becomes fodder for an appeal later on the basis if he were to be convicted. So there's all kinds of things that can be put into the appeal.
Interesting. I wonder if the judge was trying to kick it down the road.
Oh, there's no doubt the judge wanted someone else to have to make the hard decision.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to. He's up for re-election right now, and he doesn't want to do that in an election year.
Nice. Well, Joanne Walster has this question. I'm getting very depressed with everything going on. How do I find a way to start getting positive?
Good question, Joanne. Look, for me personally, and I can't speak for anyone else, but what keeps me grounded is my faith. Ultimately, I look at the world and I say, there's some really horrible things going on, but this is not my permanent residence. I'm passing through. And when this one's over, I've made arrangements to be in one where everything gets sorted out. And so when I really get down, and by the way, I do, I get frustrated and discouraged. I just remember, because I've read the end of the book, I kind of cheated. I went to the very back of the book, and here's what I discovered. No matter what it looks like late in the second half, in the end, we win. So that's my comfort. I hope it can become yours.
All right, I think this is kind of a rhetorical question of sorts. Sorry if I butcher your name. Dale Elidakis, who do you think will win the Russian elections today?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Since Putin will make sure that not only he wins, but he wins with a landslide, why didn't Chuck Schumer say something about that election? Because he didn't care. He pretends he does, but he doesn't.
Well, speaking of Schumer, Purple Haze has this question. Does what Senator Schumer said count as encouraging an insurrection in another country?
Good point. I hadn't thought about it, but yes, to your point, excellent. It is encouraging an insurrection, an overthrow of the government. One more question?
But it's okay. He's a Democrat.
Sure.
So it's fine.
So do whatever he wants.
All right. Let's see here. Great question here. God's Offspring asks, do you think Trump's mugshot should be put on the front of Trump Force One? Wouldn't that look awesome descending from the clouds? I think we know the answer to that.
You know, he's put it on mugs and T-shirts, and so it's out there. It's kind of funny. I find it absolutely amazing that what would have destroyed most candidates have boosted his numbers. I want to close with this one video. This is from Canada, and they've had 8 years of utter insanity with Justin Trudeau, and now they're telling people, if someone's going to break into your house to steal your car, leave your car keys up close to the front so it'll be easier for them just to take your car and not hurt you. Watch this. This is insane.
There's also updated advice for all vehicle owners, a message echoed by Toronto police speaking at an Etobicoke safety meeting last month. Constable Marco Ricciardi had a new message for vehicle owners who keep their fobs in Faraday pouches.
To prevent the possibility of being attacked in your home, leave your fobs at your front door, because they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else. A lot of them that they're arresting have guns on them, and they're not toy guns, they're real guns. They're loaded.
And you know what's bad? In Canada, those citizens whose homes are being broken into, they're not allowed to have guns because citizens can't protect themselves in Canada. So they're told, just leave your car keys up front where everybody can see them, and that way if somebody breaks into your house and they've got a gun. My first question, why do they have a gun and the homeowner doesn't? Isn't that stupid? Some idiot breaks into my house. I don't know the outcome of the gunfight, but we're about to have one. That much I do know. And this nonsense about, no, you can't protect yourself. Of course, the cops can't come either. That's crazy. But let's not be too tough on the Canadians, our friends up north, because it's happening here in the United States. This is what's happening in Pittsburgh.
Rick, what was the big takeaway today?
Yeah, Susan, residents of the city will see a major change in the way police respond. They will no longer respond to calls that aren't considered in-progress emergency. That means calls like criminal mischief, theft, harassment, and most burglary alarms will all be handled by an enhanced telephone reporting unit. That means residents will file a police report over the phone. Officers will not respond unless it's an emergency. Also, between the hours of 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., there will be no officers at any of the 6 stations throughout the city.
What they've just said is if you're going to commit a crime, do it between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. because none of the officers are going to be at the police station. But don't worry. If you've got an emergency, call and leave a message at the beep. We'll get back to you in a few days. Folks, if that's not a reason to protect yourself and arm yourself and be locked and loaded in your own home, I don't know what is. But this is what you have when you elect these Democrats, George Soros-supported prosecutors and police people. That's what you get. And if you're happy with that, keep voting for those folks. Me? I can't stomach it. I cannot believe this country can survive with that kind of nonsense. Be sure to leave your thoughts and your comments in the comments section. There's still time to do that. We will read them even after we go off the air. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Push that like button, click the notification bell so we can let you know about our next live stream. And remember, we normally stream every Friday unless we tell you otherwise. We're so glad that you joined us today. Got a great show this weekend on TBN, and I hope you will watch. Here's a little preview.
This week on Huckabee, author Tim Carney and his new book, Family Unfriendly. The amazing magic of Scott Green. Irish chef Judith McLaughlin creates a St. Paddy's Day feast. And rock and roll icon Chuck Leavell plays a classic Allman Brothers tune. Watch Huckabee Saturday at 8, 7 Central, and again on Sunday at 9, 8 Central, right here on TBN.